Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let us learn about the Balkans. So I want to know what happened. I hope you guys are doing well. My name's Connor if you're new. Original link to the video from the Great War. Awesome channel. Top of the description. Preemptive like. So, I want to know what happened between the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire, or, you know, the Balkans under the Ottoman Empire from around the 1870s, I think, to World War One. Because I know the Ottoman Empire was on a slow decline, and when World War One came around, it was definitely not doing well. But I would like to just know what was going on in the Balkans a bit more. That's what we're going to do. Let's learn.
But in 1912 and 1913, the Balkans were torn apart by not one, but two wars that radically changed the map, nearly dragged Europe into a general war, caused untold civilian suffering, and helped set the stage for the First World.
So yeah, guys, and if anyone knows, like, a bit earlier on, we're going through, 1912, 1913 here, but I'd really like to know even earlier on what was going on.
War. Untold civilian suffering, and helped set the stage for the First World War. The armies of the Balkan League marched together against the ailing Ottoman Empire, only for alliances to change, and all turned against one. It's the Balkan Wars. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire controlled the multi-ethnic and multi-religious Balkan Peninsula, but the 19th century brought dramatic change. As the empire grew weaker and nationalism among the Balkan peoples grew stronger, new states emerged. Montenegro, Greece, Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria gained first informal and later formal independence. This did not happen without bloodshed, including uprisings, Ottoman repression, independence wars, and great power intervention to protect their own interests. The decisive Russian victory in the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-78 ensured the independence of the Balkan states, but also provoked the suspicions of the other powers by creating a large and Russia-friendly Bulgaria. A concerned Austria-Hungary occupied Ottoman.
Sorry, I won't rewind too much, right?
1877-78 ensured the independence of the Balkan states, but also provoked the suspicions of the other powers by creating a large and Russia-friendly Bulgaria. A concerned Austria-Hungary occupied Ottoman Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Sanjak of Novi Pazar in 1878, and Britain worried that Russia might get too close to the Turkish Straits.
Okay, so ailing Ottoman Empire, a lot of uprisings in the Balkans starting, and people see Russia kind of going in to get some influence, and other countries don't want Russia to take advantage of all of this, and so Austria's moving into Bosnia, and other countries are getting worried.
1878, and Britain worried that Russia might get too close to the Turkish Straits. So the powers met in Berlin to modify the borders of the preliminary Peace of San Stefano to limit Russian influence. They returned most of Macedonia to the Ottomans, which angered Bulgarian leaders like Ivan Geshov. When we read the agreement in which a short-sighted diplomacy in Berlin partitioned our homeland, we were left crushed and thunderstruck. Was such an injustice possible? Could such an injustice be reversed? The Peace of 1878 did not stabilize the region, as no state was satisfied with the resulting borders. Serbia and Bulgaria even fought a brief war in 1885, as did Greece and the Ottomans in 1897. By the start of the 20th century, local and great power tensions in the Balkans were running high. The new states hoped to expand their territory at the expense of the Ottomans and each other, and the great powers were still nervous about the balance of power in the region. Austria-Hungary worried that Serbia was a danger, since some in Serbia also wanted closer ties with their fellow Serbs and other South Slavs in the dual monarchy, and Serbia had close relations with Russia. Russia was glad to have new allies in the Balkans and wanted access to the Turkish Straits, but worried that someone else might get their hands on Constantinople if the Ottomans collapsed completely. The Ottoman Empire was in a state of crisis externally and internally. Its defeats had cost it much of its European lands and brought violent instability at home. 1908, though, would be a decisive year. The Young Turk Revolution in July brought a...
So it seems like there are a bunch of sharks, and there's a dying whale carcass, and everyone smells it. The dying whale carcass is the Ottoman Empire. and everyone wants to make sure they get as much of the whale as possible. Is that a good analogy or not?
Fresh constitution would be a decisive year. The Young Turk Revolution in July brought a fresh constitution and a desire to modernize the empire and army, create a stronger Ottoman identity, and preserve Ottoman territory. The Young Turk Revolution in July 1908, though, would be a decisive year. The Young Turk Revolution in July brought a fresh constitution and a desire to modernize the empire and army, create a stronger Ottoman identity, and preserve Ottoman territories, in particular Macedonia. But in October, Austria-Hungary shook the Balkans and Europe by annexing Bosnia after 30 years of occupation and withdrawing from Novi Pazar. Russia was outraged, and Bulgaria used the opportunity to sever all formal ties to the Ottomans. The result was more international tension and more chaos in Constantinople. Conservative forces tried to overthrow the new Ottoman constitution in 1909, which led to a counter-coup, yet another constitution, and a new sultan, Mehmet V. The next year, even formal control of Crete was lost, and Albanians revolted in favor of more autonomy with Montenegrin support. The Balkan states also had their share of problems, with Serbia and Greece suffering coups of their own, and all nations having difficulty exerting political control over their influential and nationalistic military leadership. While the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire were in turmoil, in 1911, Italy decided the time was right to expand its empire. Traditionally, Britain, France, and more recently Germany had supported the Ottoman Empire to prevent a total collapse. But now, they allowed Italy to attack and occupy Ottoman Libya and the Dodecanese Islands. The Italo-Turkish War of 1911-12 ended with defeat for the Ottomans, who tried to limit their losses at the negotiating table. But the Balkan states had been watching closely and planned to take advantage of Ottoman troubles with Russian encouragement. The Serbian and Bulgarian governments began alliance talks in fall 1911, just after the Italo-Turkish War began, and in March 1912, they agreed on a defensive alliance, which changed to an offensive alliance in May. Soon after, Montenegro and Greece joined with separate agreements, and the Balkan League was born. The League resolved to make war on the Ottoman Empire to gain what they felt were lands that belonged to their peoples.
So all these countries are seeing other countries starting to like take land that they might want, and so rather than wait for the larger countries to kind of divide up the Balkans in a way that these Balkan countries wouldn't want, they're joining together to try and take some before others get it.
They had conflicting claims.
Anything I say that's false, guys, please, Jesus, but let me know.
All said dated back to medieval times. Serbia Ottoman Empire to gain what they felt were lands that belonged to their peoples, but they had conflicting claims they all said dated back to medieval times. Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece wanted Macedonia, while Bulgaria and Greece both wanted Thrace. Montenegro and Serbia wanted the Sanjak of Novi Pazar, the area around the port of Scutari on the Adriatic, and Kosovo. The Albanians hoped for autonomy, which would also include Scutari and Kosovo. In most of these regions, the mix of nationalities and religions did not align with political plans. Turks, Albanians, Bulgarians, Serbs, Montenegrins, Greeks, Jews, and other groups all lived in communities that overlapped over the centuries. The League wanted to take territory from the Ottomans, but made few formal agreements on how it would be divided. Serbia and Bulgaria agreed on how to divide part of Macedonia, but part was considered a disputed zone that could be assigned after the war with Russian arbitration. So the Balkan League determined to make war on the Ottomans without a clear post-war plan to divide the spoils. But first, they would have to defeat the Ottoman army, just as the Italians had done. The First Balkan War began on October 8, 1912, when Montenegro attacked the Ottomans ahead of schedule to get the jump on rival Serbia. The rest of the Balkan League members quickly gave the Ottomans a pro forma ultimatum. Hard-pressed Ottoman Grand Vizier Ahmet Muhtar Pasha wanted to save the peace and even demobilized part of the Ottoman Third Army in Thrace, but the influential Young Turk party called the Committee for Union and Progress wanted to fight. The empire was again at the brink of civil war, but declared war on the Balkan League on October 16th. Most European observers expected that the Ottomans would win. The empire's population of 24 million was more than twice the League's combined 10 million, and on paper the Ottomans could field 600,000 men. The regular troops also had gained experience fighting the Italians and rebels in Albania and Macedonia. But the Ottomans also faced problems. Many of their best officers, like Mustafa Kemal and Enver Bey, were stuck in Libya, and the reserve troops were badly trained and equipped with a mishmash of weaponry. The Ottoman navy was weak, and the army only had 315,000 men in Europe. The Balkan League could count on 825,000 soldiers, 350,000 Bulgarians, 230,000 Serbs, 200,000 Greeks, and 45,000 Montenegrins.
They had over twice the population, and yet they have less troops.
230,000 Serbs, 200,000 Greeks, and 45,000 Montenegrins. Most of the soldiers were peasant conscripts, equipped with a variety of European weapons, including French and German artillery and a few observation aircraft. The Greek navy, with 16 destroyers and an armored cruiser, ensured control of the Aegean Sea. When the great powers issued a statement on October 10th saying that they wanted to keep the territorial status quo if it came to war, what they really meant was they would not allow the Ottomans to expand if they won. All over the Balkans, families saw their young men off to the front, including Bulgarian Netku Kablashkov's 21-year-old son, Anton. By noon, Anton's chest was overflowing with flowers from well-wishers, and we sent him off to the train station. On the way, we ran into a crippled Greek. This meeting was a bad omen. I feared that my son would also be crippled. I wanted us to go back, but I didn't want to discourage him, so we continued on towards the station. In eastern Thrace, 3 Bulgarian armies faced the Ottoman First Army. The Ottomans thought the Bulgarians would move on Macedonia, so that's where they had most of their troops. But the Bulgarians instead sent the bulk of their units towards the fortress towns of Edirne and Kırıkkilise, also known as Adrianople and Lozengrad, on the road to Constantinople. Bulgarian troops surrounded the Ottoman garrison at Edirne, and Bulgarian Deputy Commander-in-Chief Mikhail Savov said that he was ready to sacrifice 100,000 men to storm it. The Bulgarians did not storm the fortress, but young Anton Kablashkov was killed just outside its walls. East of Edirne, Ottoman First Army commander Abdullah Pasha thought he outnumbered the enemy, so he sent his troops forward in a hasty advance on October 21st. At the Battle of Kırıkkilise, the outnumbered Ottomans fought for 3 days before the Bulgarians broke their lines. The Bulgarians could probably have completely smashed the Ottoman army if they had pursued them, but instead they rested while the Ottomans rushed in reinforcements and restored discipline. Ottoman senior officer Muhtar Pasha reflected on the disaster. The causes of our defeat are to be found in our bad military organization and in the lack of discipline of our reservists. But the principal cause was the rain, which had continued for a week, completely destroying the morale of our army, and for 3 days, rendering impassable the roads and fields to our trains and artillery. On the 29th, the Bulgarians attacked the fresh Ottoman defensive positions at Lulea-Burgas. At first, the Ottomans were able to hold the line, but when their logistics couldn't furnish the guns with enough shells, the Bulgarians again defeat them thanks to determined infantry attacks and superior artillery. Each side suffered 20,000 killed and wounded in the largest battle in Europe between 1871 and 1914. On November 2nd, reeling Ottoman forces retreated to the Çatalca line, just 30 kilometers from the imperial capital of Constantinople. The Ottoman government requested an armistice, but Bulgarian Tsar Ferdinand refused and did not inform his allies. On November 17th, the Bulgarians tried to break through the Çatalca line and fulfill Tsar Ferdinand's dream of reaching the old Byzantine capital, but fierce Ottoman resistance.
So how does Greece feel about this? They're probably this is the funny thing, is that like they want the Ottomans to be defeated, but they want the land in this area in Thrace, and so seeing Bulgaria going, it'd be like, oh crap, they're gonna get it.
Stretched logistics, the old Byzantine capital, but fierce Ottoman resistance, stretched logistics, and a cholera outbreak stopped them. Still, with Bulgarian advances on land and the Greek navy off the coast, Ottoman forces in the rest of the Balkans had been cut off. Some of the towns and villages captured by Bulgarian troops in Thrace were populated by Bulgarians, many of whom considered themselves liberated. Elena Bijeva later recalled when Bulgarian irregulars, among them poet Peyu Yavorov, entered her town. When the people entered the church, they took off their fezes and held them in their hands, and Yavorov sat on the priest's chair and began speaking. He said we were free and that we needn't fear Turkish prisons anymore. Then he asked, "What will you do with those fezes?" And they all tossed them to the ground and trampled them. It was like they were taking out all their anger at the Turks on those fezes. Meanwhile, in Macedonia, Serbian forces came up against Ottoman resistance quicker than General Radomir Putnik expected at Kumanovo. The Serbs outnumbered the Ottoman Vardar army 100,000 to 58,000, but the Ottomans under Zeki Pasha launched the first attacks on October 23rd. In the driving rain and mud, the Serbs counterattacked at great cost, which observers compared to the Japanese attacks in the Russo-Japanese War. But the firepower of modern artillery and machine guns meant soldiers dig trenches and foxholes to keep out of harm's way. Serbian medic Dragoljub Radojkovic was in the midst of the fighting. I look out of the trench and see a wounded man on the parapet. I shout to him, but he doesn't hear me. He's hit again and faints. Some men carry him in, and blood is gushing from his neck. I wrap one bandage, then another. We get him onto a stretcher, but the man dies. In the end, the Serbian artillery carried the day, and the Serbs won the Battle of Kumanovo. The victory earned Putnik the title of Vojvoda, left the Serbs in possession of the part of Macedonia disputed with the Bulgarians, and routed the Ottomans, who fled to the south. Another result was chaos amongst the local Muslim population and many dead and wounded on both sides. Radojkovic was at the train station a day after the battle. In the morning, we went down to the train station in Kumanovo. Captured Turks, the Turkish people, women, children, everything was crowded there. The trains were not running. One freight train was full of wounded and another full of dead Turks. Blood dripped from the wagon onto the rails. Jeez. The Serbs pursued and pushed the Ottomans back at the battles of Prilep and Monastir, while the Ottomans withdrew to southern Albania. The Serbs also moved forces west towards Scutari and the Adriatic coast, where they joined Montenegrin forces besieging the town. In the north, the Serbs also captured the Sanjak of Novi Pazar and the town of Prizren, which the Montenegrins had wanted. Serbian troops also enter Kosovo, but face resistance from local Albanians. In the south, the Greek army of Thessaly made straight for Salonika. Greece was also interested in Macedonia, but they prioritized the drive for Salonika to reach it before the Bulgarians could. Greek troops pushed the Ottomans aside at Sarantaporos Pass and with more difficulty at Yanitsa. The way to Salonika was open, and the Greek army surrounded the city on November 7th. A Bulgarian division rushed south, and the commander sent a message ahead asking the Ottomans to surrender to him instead of to the Greeks, but it was too late. The Ottoman commander replied that he only had one Salonika, and he had surrendered it to the Greeks on November 8th. This was a critical League victory, as Ottoman forces were now completely cut off from any hope of reinforcement. It was also a personal tragedy for Ottoman officer Mustafa Kemal, as it was his hometown and fueled his anger at Constantinople. Then one day I heard my homeland Salonika, my mother, my sister, my relatives and acquaintances were handed over to the enemy by the very Ottoman leadership who expelled me for unveiling the truth about them. Kemal also said that he would have fired every Ottoman officer above the rank of major. After taking Salonika, Greek and Bulgarian troops began an uneasy joint presence in the city. In the west, Greek troops also made progress and besieged the Ottoman fortress at Yanina. As the Balkan League armies advanced, the Christian and Muslim civilian populations suffered from atrocities committed by all sides. This was made worse by the presence of irregular forces of locals who supported their countrymen's armies, but also blurred the line between soldiers and non-combatants for enemy troops. Some Christians turned on Muslim officials who had repressed them in the past, or on Muslim and sometimes Christian landowners before seizing their lands. A British journalist with the Bulgarian army reported, The track of the Bulgarian army in Thrace is marked by 80 miles of ruined villages. Greek commander Crown Prince Constantine ordered Muslim villages destroyed since he claimed that Muslims were shooting at his troops, and Greek soldier Stratis Mirivilis later included his experience in his writing. All male prisoners in the village were to be executed. I was opposite an old Turk. His grandfatherly face was bruised, he whispered prayers, and his silky beard moved in the wind. I pulled the trigger, and he fell into the mud like he was struck by lightning. After the executions, we set the village on fire. Suddenly, a frenzied crowd rushed over, children and women freed from the mosque where we had imprisoned them. They run to the corpses screaming to look for their loved ones. This memory lives and circulates inside me like an anguished virus. Constantinople was filled with hundreds of thousands of Muslim refugees, with the old city turned into a camp, including the famous Blue Mosque.
Whenever I hear like, oh, the Balkans are complicated or they're a mess or whatnot, or they're, complicated is the word. Man, is that true? I mean, all the different, it makes so much more sense why the gunpowder, what's it called? Why this is where the World War I was started. It just makes more and more sense. You have all different sides who are on the same side in the Balkans against the Ottomans, but they all have conflicting territorial wishes that conflict with each other. And then you have other parties outside that don't want Russia to get too powerful and are seen taking up territory. And then the Balkans people want to make sure they get their land. God, jeez.
And the Hagia Sophia city turned into a camp, including the famous Blue Mosque, and the Hagia Sophia Mosque turned into a cholera hospital. The British consul at Salonika was blunt. The result of the massacre of Muslims at the beginning of the war, of the looting of their goods in the ensuing months, of the settling of Christians in their villages, of their persecution by Christian neighbors, of their torture and beating by Greek troops, has been the creation of a state of terror amongst the Islamic population. Their one desire is to escape from Macedonia and to be again in a free land. The powers sent warships to Constantinople to protect the city's Christian population from what they feared might be revenge killings by Muslims. In just a few weeks, the Balkan League had put together a string of decisive victories. Nearly all of Ottoman Europe was now under their control, except for the fortresses of Edirne, Yanina, and Scutari. As a result of the Ottoman collapse, an Albanian group, supported by Austria and Italy, declared independence on November 28, 1912. On December 3rd, the Ottomans signed an armistice with Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Serbia, but Greek military operations continued. So the Balkan League was victorious on all fronts, but despite the armistice, the war was not over, and the great powers were on the cusp of getting involved themselves. Even though the Ottoman armies were beaten in the field and the fleet was bottled up by the stronger Greek navy, militarily the empire might have had a chance to recover. It still held important fortresses, it was holding on the Çatalca line, had more reserves in Asia, and the Balkan League was divided over the possible spoils. But the Ottomans had no allies. This time, the great powers would not support the empire as they had in the past, and even Germany declared that the war was, quote, a free fight with no favor. The powers now said that they would go back on their declaration about the territorial status quo and accept border changes in favor of the League. Even Austro-Hungarian Foreign Minister Leopold Berchtold said that Vienna would not oppose Serbian expansion except for an Adriatic port. Russia was now worried that the Bulgarians might actually get to Constantinople before them, and so they urged restraint. The events in the Balkans had also pushed Europe to the brink of
Yeah, go get him. Whoa, 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 whoa. You're doing too well. We want that. Calm down, guys.
war. The events in the Balkans had also pushed Europe to the brink of war. On November 21st, Austria-Hungary acted to, in its view, prevent Serbia from permanently occupying the Adriatic coast. Vienna mobilized 6 army corps, 3 facing the Balkans and 3 facing Russia. Kaiser Wilhelm secretly assured the Austrians that if Russia mobilized, Germany would support Austria, just as he would do again in July 1914. In response to the Austrian moves, the Tsar held a meeting with his war.
Hold on.
The events in the Balkans had also pushed Europe to the brink of war. On November 21st, Austria-Hungary acted to, in its view, prevent Serbia from permanently occupying the Adriatic coast. Vienna mobilized 6 army corps, 3 facing the Balkans and 3 facing Russia. Kaiser Wilhelm secretly assured the Austrians that if Russia mobilized, Germany would support Austria, just as he would do again in July 1914. In response to the Austrian moves, the Tsar held a meeting with his war council, and the army drew up plans for a partial mobilization. But the council decided not to mobilize, partly out of fear of provoking Germany, and partly because some ministers didn't want to risk war over Serbian access to the sea. The German government did not know how close the Russians had come to mobilizing when they held their own infamous War Council meeting on December 8th. Chief of the General Staff von Moltke felt that Germany should declare war now, before Russia got any stronger, but in the end, the Council decided against it. Following the war scare and December armistice, 2 parallel conferences took place in London on December 16th and 17th, 1912. At the first conference, Ottoman delegate Reshid Pasha said that his government would give up Macedonia and Salonika, but not Edirne, Eastern Thrace, or the 4 islands at the mouth of the Dardanelles that Greece was demanding. The Ottomans also insisted on an independent Albania rather than it being split between the Serbs, Montenegrins, and Greeks. The Bulgarians made a new demand for Edirne to compensate for the lands that they might lose to the Serbs, but this was a particular sticking point because the fortress city was important for the safety of Constantinople. Reshid Pasha put it simply to the Bulgarian representative: Edirne is a window into our harem. The Greeks and Bulgarians argued over who would get Salonika, while the Serbs and Bulgarians argued over Macedonia. Meanwhile, at the separate Great Powers Conference, the main topic was the borders of Albania, of critical importance for Austria-Hungary to limit Serbian power. But events in Constantinople overtook diplomacy. On January 23, 1913, a young Turk government took power again after yet another coup and the murder of War Minister Nazim Pasha. Supported by influential Turkish officers like Enver Bey, many of whom came from the Balkan lands that were now lost, they decided to continue the war to prevent the loss of Thrace. New Ottoman Foreign Minister Nuradunyan Efendi was defiant. If Edirne continues to resist, we shall fight to relieve her. If Edirne falls, we shall fight to retake her. Ottoman troops, including Mustafa Kemal, landed on Gallipoli on February 7th, and at first they pushed the Bulgarians back around Bulayr. But the Bulgarians rallied and the Ottoman attack failed, with the loss of 6,000 dead to just 114 Bulgarians.
Jesus.
Elsewhere, the Greeks took Yanina on March 6th, and the Bulgarians and Serbians finally captured Edirne on March 26th. French journalist Gustave Cyrilli described the state of the people in the starving city. It was like a scene out of a fantastic tale.
I want to know how the Ottomans got this weak, which is why I really want to learn about the Ottomans in the 1700s and more importantly, in the late 1700s, early 1800s to mid 1800s. I would really like to know what the Ottoman Empire. When did it go? Was it just gradual since it was beginning, or were they super powerful for a long time and then a gradual? It's how did they decline? At what pace? What angle?
It was like a scene out of a fantastic tale. To see these human rags with protruding teeth devouring a sort of bread, black lava in which the barely ground seeds fell out in yellow spots. Those who did not get their share of the fought-over morsels watched the others savor them with envious tears in their eyes. At Scutari, Serbian troops arrived to help the Montenegrins, who ignored warnings from the great powers and assaulted the city. A combined fleet of the powers blockaded Montenegro, causing the Serbs to leave. But the Montenegrins managed to take the city April 24th, only to agree to give it up to a future independent Albania just days later. The Ottomans had no choice but to accept.
Wait, so did I miss something? Wouldn't they rather have Montenegro get parts of Albania than Serbia get it? Or did they say that Montenegro was like too close with Serbia and that Serbia might, use them to get a port eventually in the Adriatic?
Just days later. The Ottomans had no choice but to accept a peace deal, and the belligerents signed the Treaty of London on May 30th, 1913, which reduced Ottoman Europe to a small strip of land outside of Constantinople and created the Principality of Albania. The First Balkan War came to an end in May 1913, and the Ottoman Empire in Europe seemed to be a thing of the past. But the borders between the victorious Balkan League members are another matter altogether. Even before the First Balkan War had come to an end, further conflict was brewing. Not only did the Balkan League members dispute where the new borders would be, but Romania had also begun to make demands for southern Dobruja, which was part of Bulgaria. In May 1913, the powers awarded the town of Silistra to Romania, which angered both sides and made some Bulgarians doubt Russia as a reliable ally. Bulgarians were also frustrated because in their view, they'd won the strategically important Thrace battles, but the Serbs were left in possession of most of Macedonia and didn't want to honor the pre-war agreement. Bulgaria and Greece were also still in conflict over Salonika.
Well, Bulgaria got a good amount of land. And they still want more.
Russia tried to...
So Bulgaria seems to be the strongest, maybe Serbia, maybe Greece too, but Bulgaria seems to be maybe the strongest of the Balkan League countries. Is that true?
And Greece were also still in conflict over Salonika. Russia tried to mediate between Serbia and Bulgaria, but the two rivals could not agree, and the Russians were still nervous about Bulgarian troops so close to Constantinople. The Bulgarian army was in a fragile state, as many soldiers were exhausted from the war, and some were willing to split Macedonia with their allies if it meant peace. General Savov told the government to either send the men home or go to war now. Without strong Russian backing, Sofia feared it might lose Macedonia for good, so the Tsar ordered an attack against Serbia and Greece on June 29th, although it's not clear how much the government knows about this before the shooting starts. The Second Balkan War had begun. The Bulgarian Prime Minister tried to stop the fighting in Macedonia, but it was too late. The Greeks and Serbs could claim that Bulgaria was the aggressor and agreed to divide Macedonia between themselves. Montenegro also joined to stay in Serbia's good graces. On the Bulgarian side, the sudden attack had confused communication and hampered operations. Their attack was uncoordinated, and the Serbs eventually stopped it and defeated the Bulgarians at Bregalnica by July 8th. The Greeks defeated a smaller Bulgarian army around Kilkis and Doiran around the same time and eliminated isolated Bulgarian units at Salonika. Bulgarian Mikhail Majarov's son was killed in the fighting. I lost my very last hope. From that moment forth, I became a man haunted by grief. All around me seemed to go dark. All the misery and all the sorrow of Bulgaria appeared to me to be twice as great. Each and every object in my home served as a reminder to me of my lost happiness. On July 11th, Greek and Serb forces met and the front stabilized. Retreating Bulgarians attacked Greek, Turkish, and Serbian civilians, and advancing Greek and Serbian troops committed atrocities against Bulgarian civilians, again after claims of attacks against their own troops. Turkish civilian Ibo Shaha felt empathy for Bulgarian refugees. A Bulgarian peasant was leading a scrawny donkey on the wooden saddle of which sat a child, her bare legs dangling on one side. The misery, the look of a dread and utter agony in the small, blinking eyes of the pockmarked face with the yellow, straggly beard were the very embodiment of human fear and despair. No, not human. It was the animal dread of cattle at the slaughterhouse, the wild, glassy stare of terror in a cornered animal. It was a look which, once perceived, made one cringe with shame and humiliation, the shame of its having been in a human eye. Meanwhile, Romania saw its chance and entered the war on July 10th to take all of southern Dobruja. 250,000 Romanian troops of the Army of the Danube entered Bulgaria and moved towards Sofia. The Bulgarians decided not to offer organized resistance. Advancing Romanian troops, however, rode straight into a cholera epidemic due to unsanitary conditions. Chaplain Dumitru Brumușescu complained bitterly about the army's lack of medical care. In the hospital, there are no beds, so the men lie on the floor in their uniforms. They've barely the strength to moan or ask for water. Some are delirious with spasmodic movements of their arms and hands. Some vomit onto the floor, while others relieve themselves where they lay. The lack of furniture, dishes, linens, medical devices, medicine, and antiseptic rendered the presence of army doctors useless. I've seen a lot of messes, but this one topped them all. About 2,700 Romanian soldiers die of cholera in summer 1913. Now the Ottomans saw their opportunity to recover parts of Thrace, so they crossed the Cetalja line on July 12th. The few Bulgarian troops left in the area could...
Bulgaria, come on. Bulgaria, you had... Why am I speaking to Bulgaria? The Bulgarians had an enormous amount of the land. They had the part of the Dardanelles that were so close to Constantinople. They got Thrace. And they just, because they wouldn't get half of Macedonia, this happens. Oh my God, talk about, it's like at a casino and you win, all this money is, yeah, it's like, all right, one more. Lose everything and your house. It's Jesus, Bulgaria. You couldn't just settle with the amazing stuff you got.
Could offer only token resistance, and the Ottomans recaptured the fortress of Edirne without firing a shot on July 23rd. Many Bulgarians...
Okay, Ottomans, all right. Sorry. I'm sorry, okay. The Ottomans... The only way they win is if they don't have to fight, I guess, here.
Edirne without firing a shot on July 23rd.
And this is why, guys, I want to know how the Ottoman Empire got this incompetent at the end. What happened?
Many Bulgarian civilians fled, creating a new wave of refugees, and another outbreak of cholera killed 4,000 Ottoman troops. As Romanian troops got closer to Sofia and Russia refused to intervene to help Bulgaria, the pro-Russian Bulgarian government resigned. It was replaced by a pro-German government under Vasil Radoslavov, but fighting continued. Bulgarian forces recovered to win a defensive battle against the Serbs and Montenegrins at Kalimansi and a successful counterattack against the Greeks at Kresna Gorj. The Greeks asked for an armistice, and Sofia ordered a stop to operations since even a Bulgarian victory could not reverse the tide of the war. The peace treaties signed in August and September 1913 ended the Second Balkan War and redrew the map of the Balkans yet again, this time to Bulgaria's disadvantage. Romania got southern Dobruja. Austria-Hungary and Russia...
So guys, the first Balkan War is the Balkans fighting together to free themselves from the Ottomans. And the Second Balkan War is then, after the Ottomans are kicked out, fighting amongst each other. Okay? That's good to remember.
The Balkans yet again, this time to Bulgaria's disadvantage. Romania got southern Dobruja. Austria-Hungary and Russia refused to support Serbian maximalist demands in Macedonia so they could retain some influence with Bulgaria. Serbia did get most of Macedonia, but Bulgaria kept a part and Greece kept Salonika. The Ottomans regained eastern Thrace despite their defeat in the First War. The Balkan Wars left a lasting impact on the region and Europe as a whole.
Honestly, I mean, you lost, this bit to Romania. I'm not sure how, and big part of Thrace. But I feel like because of it seems like a lot of times countries, like not the big boy countries, but like Germany and France and the UK and Russia, like they kind of come in and save because they're kind of playing chess up here, you know, and you know, they want Bulgaria to still be somewhat strong, so that they can use them to their advantage in the future. But that's all that saved Bulgaria. Why did you want to? Okay.
The fighting and the cholera were deadly. 125,000 Ottoman soldiers died, along with 65,000 Bulgarians, 36,000 Serbs, 9,500 Greeks, and 3,000 Montenegrins.
Oh.
After more than 600 years, the Ottoman presence in the Balkans was nearly gone. Albania was independent, but its neighbors claimed its territory. And many Balkan Christians saw the change as the end of foreign domination and oppression. For more than 300,000 Balkan Muslims, however, the changes meant expulsion from their homes and an uncertain future in Anatolia. And for some young Turks, it meant radicalization against Christians still within the empire. Enver Pasha, who hailed from the Balkans and would later play a key role in the Armenian genocide and the killing of Ottoman Greeks in the First World War, shared his anger. How could anyone forget the plains, the meadows, watered with the blood of our forefathers? Abandon those places where Turkish raiders had stalled their steeds for a full 400 years, with our mosques, our tombs,
leave them
our
to our
dervish
slaves.
lodges, our
Jeez.
bridges and our castles, to leave them to our slaves, to be driven out of the Balkans to Anatolia. This...
Well, that shows kind of how, I mean, he was obviously in the moment very angry, but that kind of shows how Balkans were probably treated by the Ottomans.
To our slaves, to be driven out of the Balkans to Anatolia. This is beyond a man's endurance. I am prepared to sacrifice gladly the remaining years of my life to take revenge on the Bulgarians, the Greeks,
Why not the
and the
Serbians?
Montenegrins. The events of 1912-13
Left
helped
out
to
the
create the
Serbians.
conditions for the catastrophe of 1914 as well. Bulgarian resentment at the lack of support from Russia caused it to drift closer to Austria-Hungary and Germany, and tensions between Austria-Hungary and a much larger Serbia also increased. With Serbia as Russia's only remaining Balkan ally, Russia would be under more pressure to support Serbia in any future conflict.
So interesting. I love how it brings it all together for me, to where I can see, you know, seeing Austria-Hungary, and mainly Austria-Hungary, but the other bigger powers, looking down at what's happening in the Balkans and all that happening, and the Ottomans are kicked out, and then you know, you seeing them win, and then you're going to go into areas that piss off Serbia. Just very fucking.
And in October 1913,
Freaking
Austria
fascinating.
issued an ultimatum to Serbia with German support to force Belgrade to remove its troops from in any future conflict. And in October 1913, Austria issued an ultimatum to Serbia with German support to force Belgrade to remove its troops from northern Albania. A similar ultimatum in 1914 would transform the Third Balkan War into the Great War. The complex tragedy of the Balkan Wars is just
Wait. Oh, wait. So was there a third? So is he saying the Third Balkan War is the Great War, or like? So
one of the conflicts that we think it's important to cover in our documentary series. We also made an epic documentary about the Battle of Berlin in 1945 called 16 Days in Berlin. It's 4.5 hours long, over 18 episodes, taking you through the battle day by day. It features original film footage from Soviet cameramen, never before seen photos of the battle, detailed maps and animations, and expert interviews with David Willey from the Tank Museum, Ian from Forgotten Weapons, and more. Unfortunately, we can't upload this series to YouTube because it shows the grim reality of the Second World War, and that would get us demonetized or worse. So where can you watch 16 Days in Berlin in 4K resolution? On Nebula, a streaming service we built together with other creators and where we can upload documentaries without the fear of demonetization. We want to thank Dimitri Petrovic, Plamen Ganev, Murat Doğan, Vasilis Athanasiou, and the Serbian State Archive for their help with this episode. As usual, you can find all our sources for the episode in the video description.
Great video, guys. I forgot how much I love learning about history, because a lot of I get distracted by like a lot of numbers generated from some like police video or something. But I love learning about history, and it really it makes me feel like I'm actually progressing rather than just I love watching travel videos and funny videos and all of that I do, but like I forgot how much of I loved learning about history, okay? And I want to learn about the Ottoman Empire right now. So love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Would love if you liked and subscribed. It's perfectly free. Join me on this history journey, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye.